Hi, everyone. Welcome back. And welcome to our podcast, Psychology in Spirituality, a bridge to a better life. We meet once a week, and when we are here together to have these discussions, we explore this beautiful and quite remarkable intersection between psychology and spirituality. And it is amazing because every time we come together, I feel that we uncover timeless wisdom, and these they they help all of us to live a greater life in terms of meaning and purpose. Well, who am I? My name is Marcia Trajano, and with me today are Jussara Korngold, the founder of this program. Hi, Jussara, and Dr. Anahy Fonseca. How are you doing both?
Hi, hello, Marcia. Hi, Anahy. Hello, everyone. It's great to be back to another podcast and to have those so enriching discussions, conversations that we have it with each other. And thank you, everyone, also for the feedback that you are leaving and keep on bringing that.
Yes. Hi,
Hi,
Anahy.
everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with my good friends, Jussara and Marcia, and with all of you.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to bring something interesting today, and I just want to before we start, because this is a psychology and spirituality discussion, and we often see ourselves using references to movies, art, sculpture, paintings, etc. And I wanted just to explain why it is so endearing to me when we do that. And it's because, if you will, our souls, they don't really speak in definitions, right? It speaks in images. So it is interesting when art, as expressed in movies, for example, will allow us to see some inner processes that are usually very difficult to see. So when we talk and reference a film or a painting, it's not that we're here to talk about movies, but it's because it really helps us to recognize ourselves in the same process. And I would say they are really mirrors of our consciousness. Um, e- e- they express inner movements that can be fear, conflict, or desire, or even in the case of our podcast, transcendence and healing. So we're here today to contemplate together the psychology and spirituality of a concept that is quite interesting, captured in a book and a movie. So, are we ready? Are we ready for that? um, Wanted to bring the idea that throughout history, humanity has created images of idealized places. So we can talk about utopia, paradise, Garden of Eden, right? Or even a perfect island, hidden kingdoms, or even I love the idea that comes to our mind is somewhere in hidden underneath forest, some cities of gold. And it's interesting for us to think about it because those images, they do not come to us by chance. They are actually an expression of this deep need within us, the human spirit, to search for meaning, for balance, and the transcendence that we talked about. So we're here today, and that's our proposal, to discuss an interesting movie, and it may be dated. It was filmed in 1970s as a musical, right? And its title is Lost Horizon. I don't know if any of you here with us today have seen it. I say go for it, find the information. It will be contained in our description of this episode to see if you agree, if you see the same things. But Lost Horizon, and I saw as a child, it is an interesting movie because it was first brought to us as a book and then a movie in the 1930s. So interesting from a context, but brought back as a reinterpretation of the myth of Shangri-La, right? So what is it? It's just you find a story taking place in an isolated, quite harmonious valley. And because it is isolated, think in terms of the Himalayas, right? That mountain, and all of a sudden there's a secret place that it lives outside our own concept of time, more than the idealized, exotic um, island, right? This the setting, Shangri-La in this case is a symbol, and it points to us from a movie perspective this dialogue between spiritism, spiritualization, symbolism, psychology, and quite frankly, the spiritual experience of being human. So I'm here to talk about the idea of Shangri-La, right? And what is it? Why is it so important to us to talk about this idea, right? So let's go ahead and get started. Anahy, do you want to talk a little bit about it? I believe, just as a thought here, that Shangri-La, yes, it comes to us from a movie, but it's really the idea is not only brought forth by Hilton, right? The author of the James Hilton was the author of the book and then movie, but he synthesized many Eastern traditions, specifically from a Buddhist one, that idea that this location, and it's very interesting, is it location or is it location, our consciousness, right? This location, this hidden land of peace, it is only accessible, this is Buddhist thought, only accessible to those who are spiritually prepared to access. So it's very interesting, right? In this utopian, this mythical place, according to Buddhism, is governed by harmony, moderation, compassion. So it really exists in our consciousness more than in a place, a geographical place. So let's talk about, can we recognize that place? Do we live in that place? How can we get to that place of harmony and peace?
Okay. So, well, as you were talking and describing, okay, let's say that we are going to be giving a lot of spoilers, 50 years of spoilers, right?
Yes.
But well, the movie is wonderful and the musics are beautiful. So doesn't matter the spoilers. I know people will want to read the book or to watch the movie. But the thing is that, Marcia and Jussara, I have found it so interesting to see it again many years after the first time, of course, decades after the first time, because the movie in the 70s, something, beginning, I think, of the 70s, of what the United States and other parts of the world were still with wars and things like that, right, happening, and a lot of conflicts. And it seems like this is humanity, and Jung talks about that, to grow in a sense, to evolve in consciousness. We kind of need the conflict of the opposites. Jung talks a lot about the opposites that still in our psyche, different poles, different like good and bad, and night and day, and
Mhm.
ugliness and beauty and things like that. So, but also for us to have a context about this lost horizon and the
Mhm.
symbolism that it's in this place, as Marcia said, that is that within or without that we are talking about, right? um, and actually, I think it's both because Jung talks a lot about the zeitgeist,
Yeah.
and a lot of people have been listening to podcasts and things like that. It's pretty much in our culture to talk about the zeitgeist because in German, it's a German term that Zeit is time and Geist is spirit or mind.
Mhm.
So Zeitgeist would be the spirit of the times. And for Jung, I think we have to understand when Jung talks about that, he was talking about in his time after two world wars,
Yes.
right? And a lot of all that craziness that had been going on. So when he talks about that, of course, all the development in technology and science that happened after that, or during and after the wars. So he says that the spirit of his time, right,
Mhm.
was that very materialistic and pretty much concerned with the materialistic science. But thanks
Mhm.
God we are living this paradigm, but that's for another podcast,
Yes.
right? And also very, rational and very superficial in a sense, because
Mhm.
it's of course when we have like traumas, psychologically speaking, traumas in this so deep traumas like wars, like pandemic, things like that, that
Mhm.
globally we are very traumatized, and we are faced with the worst of our fears. For instance, what happens is that the ego, we are talking also about the ego, right? The ego develops to adapt to this life, and it's
Yes.
kind of imprisoned in time and space, in this space that we live in this time. So what happens is that the ego defends itself. And of course, all right, so I heard it. I was hurting, and I was very scared of dying. For instance, I was very angry and resentful with what was going on. So I protect myself. And then I say, maybe, of course, we had developed nuclear power and all of that. So then I think, well, I mean, human beings, right? Could think, I think we had kind of an inflation of the ego, that we found
Mhm.
ourselves really powerful, really smart. And because we learned so much about the powers of nature, the physics and all of that, and we learned so much that we built a lot of weapons. That's so silly if we think of
Mhm.
spiritual growth, right? But what I mean is that all that was Jung's context after
Mhm.
two world wars. And so what he says, Marcia and Jussara and everybody else, is that it's kind of if you get stuck in the spirit of the times,
Mhm.
thinking only in these terms of ego terms, because we cannot forget the spirit of the times is also all about collective consciousness, the
Yes.
conscious that is in the collective, not the unconscious. And so the modernity, the rational mindset, we could say. So Jung says that this is an opposition in the spirit of the times, in opposition to what he called the spirit of the depths. I love that because when he talks about the spirit of the depths, he's talking about you know what, spirit of the depths would represent the timeless, the archetypal, what we were saying, and often neglected by by our ego. So the profound wisdom that we have, you know. And of course, when he talks about this archetypal dimension, we are talking about our higher selves, right? And I would love for Jussara to give the spiritist point of view of that. But just to finish this first thought,
Hmm.
Jung said that people usually are too consumed by the superficial spirit of the times, and people then lose connection with what is deep and eternal and really meaningful within ourselves, our inner world. So I would say to start that the lost horizon, we can think symbolically and as a metaphor, of course. And I love that you said that our psyche works, actually talks, let's say the language is
Yeah.
images, right? As in dreams, for instance, and we are um, gathering, I think we say, like we are thinking about anything and wondering about things. So what happens is that we have this beautiful metaphor in this movie that we have lost something so precious, that to find this thing, when it usually is after a very deep conflict, as in the beginning of the movie, right?
Hmm.
They are flying from a war zone,
Right.
and then the plane crashes. Spoiler alert, 50 years, but and they found themselves in this mountain that it's very symbolic, of course, because mountain is ascension.
Yeah.
And the if we are going to think about the symbols in the movie, so they were flying, but they were flying with something that it's man-made, our airplanes, and
Yeah.
everything that we do that it's man-made can, it's a possibility, as I was talking, for us to kind of get lost in our egos, you know, like having an inflation of the ego. And then this plane crashes up in the mountain. They haven't gone up in the mountain by themselves. The plane crashes. And then suddenly they are faced with, of course, there's rescue party
Hmm.
from the Blue Moon Valley, that it's the name of this lost place, this lost horizon, and they were taking them, so they weren't prepared for that. And I think I will stop here, because so they found something that they were not prepared to find, at least in their egos. But we can talk about the higher self, because the higher self is always calling for our individuation process. We are talking a little bit more about that. Is another
Hmm.
metaphor of the movie. But the higher self is always calling, as Joanna says, right? The
Hmm.
ego. So when the ego, unfortunately, usually has suffered enough with some crisis, then it's kind of prepared to face something, in a sense, to really look to something that it has lost this connection, right? Something. So this lost connection with something that it's precious, the spirit of the depths, let's say. Then then of course we start well, this I mean this confrontation, if we could say, from the ego and the desires and needs of the ego and the calling of the self. But I would love to
Yeah.
see you said about that.
Me too. And thank you, Anahy, because you brought forth not only the plot, but the setting, right? And the symbolism. So, Jusada, tell us a little bit from what all of us watched the movie, right? So we're here ready to deconstruct this beautiful maybe dated but beautiful concept seen in this movie. Jussara, what are your thoughts? How do you interpret that from a spiritual perspective?
Okay. One thing that I was thinking is how happy I am with this kind of conversation, because I do believe that today we are so, you know, frightened sometimes, even to talk about ideals, mystical things, and dreams, and we think that is silly. Sometimes we refer to ourselves saying, "Oh, when I was young, I wanted to be an astronaut." Okay, I mean, but we talk about it as a kind of embarrassment, thinking that we aimed for too high, or whatever. Of course, we could use examples that could be much more achievable, but I think that sometimes we get into this mode of having to be so realistic about things, and is only reason, material things that's is all that matters, that we don't allow ourselves to talk to each other about fantasy, about dreams, about ideas that we will see are not exactly that much unknown to the vast majority of society. From ancient times, we see the Greeks talking about the Elysian fields.
Yes.
Right? And then, like we were talking about here, Shangri-La is more of a Tibetan kind of perspective. Everything that is related to hope of transcendence, perfect lives. We have the Valhalla that we find in the Norse mythology. We have the Tirnanog of the Celtic mythology. We have so many peoples that have been referring to that, the Nirvana. And somehow we are all in this personal quest, because it is a personal quest. We may hide for the world from the world, because I don't know how the world will deal with that, how people will deal with that, if I keep thinking and saying, I long for a place like this. And this is where, the spirituality and psychology comes and play just one role, which is, to me, it is in you. Valhalla is in you. Shangri-La is in you. The Elysian fields are in you. And there is a roadmap. There is a way of accessing those places. They are not just mythological places. Those are places that, like Dr. Anahy Fonseca can talk to us about, the young perspective in terms of, the archetypes, in terms of, this process of individuation, which is exactly to leave us to this horizon that exists and we do not know. When we talk about spiritism, it's the same thing. You are the essence of a creator. You have to go and search for this essence. So it's like, a board game sometimes for us, right? We advance 3, 4 places, and then it's 2 backwards, and then there, you have to wait a little bit, because it's not your time to because you missed something, so you cannot play for 2 rounds. all of that for us to value. And so when we watch this movie, The Lost Horizon, I mean, you can lost from so many different perspectives. You know, people who do not dream, who are very dry and bitter with themselves, probably will say, "Ah, it's just nothing," you know. But for us, who allow ourselves to dream, to believe, to understand that there is something more. And we have been seeing that in history. There has been something more, one generation after the next. Maybe, of course, it's not the illusion fields yet, but we are advancing fast in this direction. So it is good to see a society where they give value to what is really valuable for you in terms of living, in terms of growing, in terms of, you know, evolving and finding inner peace. So I think it's just extraordinary. And when I watched the movie for the first time, I was so amazed in thinking, wow.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Marcia and Jussara, may I
Sure.
ask you guys a question?
Sure.
Because you are in the US, and I have listened to many podcasts because I investigate the collective unconscious. I have a research going on. So, and I have listened to many podcasts from people in the United States, and a lot of great things, great stuff. But one of the things, thinking about the zeitgeist of our times, that I think it's, of course, we have a lot of conflicts still going on, right? And a lot of crisis. And but there is something different, I think, from Jung's time, that it's this spiritual awakening. Just for this kind of podcast that we do and many others around the globe, talking about spirituality and in different contexts, not only in one certain religion, but spirituality in general, spiritual development, and people very interested, millions of people watching this kind of podcast. But I thought I found something very interesting. A lot of people talking. I was listening to Jussara now, and it came to my mind. A lot of people talking in some podcasts about spirituality, that we are like prisoners of a matrix. I don't know if you have heard this kind of things, because the movie's cool. It's fantastic. Matrix, the movie Neo, the character. That's another movie, but that we are talking about. But this one, everybody knows, everybody. But so many people are using this term matrix, and as if we are stuck here, as if the free will really doesn't exist, because we are stuck here and we are. Well, I have heard, including that some beings from outside of the planet were responsible for putting us here in this planet, in this reincarnation cycles. So I have heard a lot of, and you guys were talking about fantasy imagination. And for Jung, fantasy imagination is a psychic reality. It's not that it's a reality in the outside world, but it's a reality for the psyche. And we have to pay attention to this kind of images and in ourselves and in the collective. So I was listening to Jussara and thinking, Jussara, why is so difficult? And I would love for you to bring to us Kardec's and other spiritist authors, as Joanna de Angelis, the thoughts. Why is so difficult to us to think that we are here in this matrix, if you want to think of a matrix, okay, that is created actually by all of us, because thinking and imagining, as we know that in other spiritual dimensions, that are not so material as our this dimension. The thought creates, right? It really creates the environment that the spirit is in. So, and here our imagination creates. We know a lot of fictional, for instance, science fiction, movies, books, that they anticipate a lot of technology that comes some years later. So that's imagination, and that's beautiful in humankind, because we imagine, we put a lot of thoughts and a lot of and actually science also needs imagination, intuition, all of that, for us to observe nature and to try to understand its principles. That's science, a rational observation of nature and its laws, right? But we need imagination. So we fly now with airplanes and all of that, because we observed in many centuries ago the birds, right? And then we imagine ourselves flying. So what I was wondering, listening to Jussara, is why, and also considering this lost horizon, this lost connection with the spirit within, the spirit of the depths, our higher selves, why can't we be humble and understand that we have asked for this incarnation, that we have asked for this kind of challenges, because we want to evolve spiritually. We are part of the source of God. We are emanations of God, of course, but we are not gods ourselves in a sense. We can be, like, who knows, very high spirits in the future, but we have to work to that. Joanna says that she has a beautiful sentence that I wrote here to ask you about, that exterior evolution is easier to be achieved compared to that of our inner nature, which imposes sacrifices in the area of our feelings and reason. And Kardec talks about the faith as a reasoning, right? So, Jussara, I don't know if you understand what because I was thinking, listening to you, saying, well, of course, we have kind of an inflation, a collective inflation, that we think we know so much about science, that we think we know so much about the laws of nature, about ourselves. And to these days, we still have a lot of conflicts all over the world, right? We still keep doing nasty things to each other. And we still think that we are in prison here because some bad whatever being has stuck us here in this matrix, and that we have to believe and that we are gods and we can just simply not be here any longer. I'm just summarizing a lot of things that I've heard and thinking about the zeitgeist that we are in. So, Jussara, I know it's a lot of things to you, but I would love to bring to us the spiritist contact that I think it's missing in this zeitgeist for many people, at least.
This week I was listening to a talk. I don't even remember who was giving the talk, okay? But the person mentioned something that I thought, oh, I remember now. It was Artur Valadares. He was mentioning something in relation to, you know, one of the greatest mediums that we had in the world, I would say, Francisco Xavier, as we call him, you know, Chico Xavier. And he said that he was talking to this spiritual guide, the mentor Emmanuel, and they were talking about, you know, the different dwellings in, you know, that we can find in the universe. not only the spiritual dwellings, but the physical dwellings as well. And we are here talking about, a Shangri-La, Elysian Fields, Tirnanog, Valhalla, different dwellings.
Yeah.
And he asked Emmanuel if he could take him to visit some of those places. Very far away, very highly evolved. And Emmanuel said, no, it's better not. But he insisted. And then, according to how Chico describes, Emmanuel accepts. And so here he is, leaving planet Earth, observing planet Earth from above, the moon, the other planets, the solar system, the other stars that were near to our solar systems, then the Milky Way, and then, he started to move away from the Milky Way. All of a sudden, he looks to Emmanuel and say, I need to go back. I need to put on my slippers and drink a coffee. So your question remind me of that, because there are so many things that we want to know, we want to understand, but we don't have even the vocabulary to think about that.
Yeah.
And we still cannot acknowledge that everything that we have on our material world is merely a copy of what we have in spiritual, more evolved worlds or other worlds. I remember in one of the books by this, received by the medium Chico Xavier, dictated by the spirit Andrew Lewis, where he is in one of those dwellings, and then he looks at a painting in the office of this spiritual mentor, and he said, "Oh, this painting is so beautiful. I saw the original in a museum on Earth." And then the mentor said, "Well, this one is the original." The painter on, an out-of-body experience came and saw the painting and had, the intuition to paint this painting. So also, what does this mean? That when we are ready for whatever way, it doesn't matter exactly the way, we will be having visions, intuitions, ideas, collective ideas, and we will progress. I think that for the time, what can we do? We should not become a hindering for this process. That's why at the beginning of our conversation, I said, I'm so happy to be talking about it, because we have to come out in the open and say, I am a person that dreams. I am a person that believes that there is something better waiting for us, but waiting for us in the sense that I have to do something about it. It's not enough, like it shows in the movie, you all of a sudden see yourself in an environment that is far superior to what you are experiencing so far, because you may not even adapt to this environment. So if we don't go through this process, like you were saying, and in terms of self-awakening and understanding our purpose, we may be taken to paradise, like the symbolism of Adam and Eve. They were in paradise. They were lacking for nothing. But all of a sudden, that was not enough. That was not enough. I have to go. I have to see for myself. It's like when we go to treat children and say, don't do that. You're going to hurt yourself. It's not good for you. And until we go and do it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a lot of times for us to say, no, it's because I did it wrong. I'm going to try again and again. You suffer the consequence. No, but I have to still keep trying, and again you suffer the consequence until it will come a time that you will say, well, enough is enough. I have to find a different route for myself. And I think this is unfortunately not the answer that we would like to have, because I myself would like to have all the answers.
Yes.
Answer me a question.
I know, that's I love it.
Question me an answer. Right? But we have to wait and be content
Yes.
with what we are already capable of embracing. And it's so much more than we ourselves are allowing to happen. Yeah. So be open to this reality, and know that it will come to take place.
Absolutely. So for all of you who saw us smiling with Jussara singing, right? This is just one beautiful little song, but Burt Bacharach was the one who created this in the musical version of the movie. And it's just, to me, Jussara and Anahy, the songs themselves are more, they are so dense in the meanings that I would say, let's just look at the songs before you watch the movie or read the book. And that brings back to something that you said, Jussara, if I may. You mentioned the idea that Andre Luis, and he was talking about, I saw the original in the museum, right? The painting. Mm-hmm. And immediately I remembered the book, and I think it was, he wrote in early 1900s, like maybe 1914, Leon Denis, where he talks about spiritism in the arts, right? And it goes back to how we started our conversation today, because Leon Denis, him too, he brings to us how art, songs, right, music, painting, sculpture, etc., how the arts are really indeed one of the most powerful bridge between our spiritual dimension and our material dimension. So it goes back to you and I. I'd love for us, we're getting to a few more minutes together. Maybe you can wrap our conversation to talk about this sense of how the imagination, how art can brings us back to that sense of co-creators, even though we are probably disillusioned. I think that's what you're talking about, right? Some of the podcasts you're seeing, this deep sense of disillusionment, the sense that, like in the Matrix, we are feeling entrapped in a reality that it could look good, but it's really so hollow that is inauthentic. It's not our true reality, right? So tell us a little bit about it so we can close our time together today.
Well, I think, Marcia, that our zeitgeist is, we are shifting from one perspective of the world, of ourselves, to another. And that's why I think spiritist knowledge, as everything that Jussara was telling us, and Jussara took me back to Chico Xavier's book. I love that part. And he said, well, that's the original. I said, yes, that's the original. So, and you see, when Jussara took me to the book again, and the way that I imagined the scene, I lived that inside of myself. When she talked about Chico being taken because he was bothering Emmanuel, right? Take me there, I want to see, and all that. And okay, then his mentor took him to out of in space and all of that. And he realized that was too much for him. So being humble, being okay with with the evolution, like, let's say, the speed, the way that we can evolve, each one of us. And I think one of the things that Joanna brings in her, putting together Jung's analytical psychology, depth psychology, and spiritist knowledge, that is the focus of Joanna's work, is this beautiful understanding that we don't have to get paranoid with anything. Oh, I'm stuck here. Somebody put me here. Whatever being, bad being, or all that. Oh, I'll have to come back again until I get out of the matrix, like Neo, take one of the pills that I don't remember if it's the blue or red one, but then I wake up to the reality that it's awful or whatever. No, no, no. I think we have to realize, and that's the beauty of spiritist knowledge and this inner journey because this knowledge is within each one of us, right? We have in our spirit the possibility, as we evolve and we start, as Joanna is saying, evolving our consciousness. And through all these experiences in different incarnations, in different worlds, right? Because we know that we can incarnate in different worlds. So that's a wonderful way that source that God gave us to evolve, learning. And we don't learn by ourselves. We learn together. That's growing together. It's another song of the movie, living together, growing together, right?
Yes.
So that's beautiful. Another beautiful song of the movie. So one of the things is that that's great that Jung went so deep in our psyche that he found the collective unconscious in the depths of our psyche. That everything, okay, we have to individuate, we have to find our own equation, let's say, to balance the different oppositions that we still have in this level of evolution, but we do that collectively. And Jung says that navigating life, that's Jung, requires balancing the intellectual trends of the zeitgeist with the profound unconscious wisdom of the spirit of the depths, of our spirit, of our higher self, but also understanding that we are all connected. So to wrap it up, I would love to give to you the priest that of the character, that we are not going to give so many spoilers, but the priest of course had more than 200 years, but we are not going to say why, okay? But the priest talking to Richard, the main character, about why they brought them all there, especially Richard. And then Richard said, well, but this is a time of crisis, because the priest was inviting Richard to stay there. And then and Richard, that it was was considered a hero. I think he worked for the UN or something like that, helping people to get out of war zones and all. And he said, Richard said, well, this is a time of crisis, like saying, I cannot stay here, as I have work to do, I have people to help. And then the priest says, but when has the world known any other time? And he talks about the madness and blindness of so many eras. And then the priest says, when the day comes, when the world is ready for a new life, it is our belief that they will find Shangri-La. It is our hope then that our brotherly love will spread throughout the world. So I think that's so beautiful. And the last thing that he says, when the strong have devoured each other, then at last the meek shall inherit the earth.
Ah,
And we can think that as an individual, the individuals that are in this illusion of power, right, and the material world, but also as a collective. Because when, as Joanna said, when we really understand everything that Jussara was bringing to us about spiritist knowledge, that we are evolving and we are step by step, if we advance many steps without being firm like the butterfly, right? If we
yeah,
free the butterfly from its cocoon, then the wings are going to be weak, and we're not going to be and the butterfly is not going to be able to fly. So let's do that. Let's stop with this image of trying to be better than others. And let's worry only about being better than ourselves, in a sense,
yeah,
being each time, right, more loving, more grateful, and working with our shadows. Joanna tells us to really work with our shadows. Don't be afraid of our own shadows, so that we can do, as the priest said, spread our brotherly love.
love it, love it. Just to recap from our early conversation, right? We often, as we see in podcasts, et cetera, different discussions, that we feel trapped in this life that we call this incarnation, we call life. But I believe in our conversation we do that because we chose it, but while we may remember meaning, we forget method, right? And we're talking about shadow work as just one of the methods. And we also talked about how spiritual evolution today is quite paradoxical. We know, right, more than ever, yet transforming ourselves will require the one thing that we resist the most, right? Which is that patient inner work. So let us all remember Kardec's rational faith, right? It will not remove the effort, but it will give us consolation, give us a sense of dignity. So the prison that Anahy was talking about is not life or the crisis, but perhaps our resistance to the kind of work that we need to in order to grow. Whew. Anyways, this is what came to my thoughts based on our conversation today. I want to thank you both, Anahy and Jussara, and I echo your words, Jussara. I really appreciate the ability for us to come together and talk about these topics. But for you who are here with us. If this was the first time that you're listening to a program, just a reminder, the Psychology in Spirituality weekly talks are weekly talks based on the work by Joanna DeAngelis. And I hope that this conversation left some nuggets of wisdom for you to either read the book, watch the movie, or listen to the songs. Thank you both. Thank you also our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, AMI Brazil. Thank you and so long, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.